While we were working on our sales staff came to us with a little bit of a problem. They said they had acquired a leads list from someone, but that the list had all of the names in a single field. And they wondered if there was an easier way to split them out into first and last name fields rather than just working through cutting and pasting or retyping them all. We told them that we would love to help and could do so with a couple of pretty simple text functions. So we have the referrals file open from the Chapter 1 Project Files folder. And the first thing that we notice, in addition to having everything in one field, is that they're also in all caps. This happens a lot, and I'm not sure exactly why. Sometimes it's because other systems kick them out. Sometimes it's because people just enter things in all capital letters. But what we know is that for very polished and professional looking marketing materials and mail merges and other types of things, it's not best to have things in all caps. That's kind of the first red flag that things are being done using a bulk processing program. So we want to put these into proper case, where the first letter of the first name and the first letter of the last name, or maybe the second letter if appropriate, is capitalized, but everything else is in lowercase. So we're going to do that first by moving over to B1 and using a simple text function that changes case. We have upper, lower, and proper, and in this case we want to use the proper function. So we'll just type that out quickly. It's pretty straightforward. Equals proper. And the only argument is, what text do you want to change to proper text? And for us, that's currently what's in cell A1. We'll press enter, and there you go. Now let me go ahead and change the width of this column just a little bit so we can see it a little bit easier. What you will notice, and the reason that I actually put my maiden name here first, is that Excel is pretty smart, and when it sees things like apostrophes, it assumes that the second letter is supposed to be capitalized as well, like Odell or O'Neill. What it also means, though, is that since English is not perfect, and since we have names from all over the world, anytime you use one of these case functions, you should go back through and visually spot check to make sure that it converted things correctly. You may have to make a few corrections, but trust me, if you're only going to do 10 names, you'll probably be able to just retype them faster. But if you had 100 names or thousands of names, this is going to be much faster, even if you have to make a few small corrections. So now that we have that part done, let's just go ahead and fill that all the way down. Perfect. And I'm going to go ahead and change the width so we can see everything. So a quick little look over lets me see that it looks like everything did things just perfectly. All right, that's our first step. Now we have things back into proper case, but we still need to split them out into first name and last name. In order to do this, we're going to use some more text functions. Primarily, we have left and right. We can find the first name by finding the space and then saying take everything to the left of that and put it as a first name. Let's start that by typing equals left. We can see that the left function has one required and one optional argument. First of all, what text is it that we want to extract the leftmost characters from? That, as we'd imagine, is the required argument. It's the text in B1. We can see that the number of characters to extract is technically not required, but in our case, we do want to designate that number. Our challenge, though, is that we can't say exactly how many characters to extract because it depends. Each entry or each name could be, and probably will be, different. My first name happens to have 4 characters. Mabel Abels has 5. So instead of being able to hard code the number of characters, we need to use a function to determine that value. That's going to be done using the find command. The find function allows you to find text within other text. So what we'll do here, again, is fairly simple. The first thing that we want to find is a space. So that goes as double quote, space, double quote. Just like everything else we've been doing with static text, that kind of text always goes in double quotes. In this case, it's a space, so we're not typing anything except for the space character. The second part has to do with what text we're looking in. And that, of course, gets to be easy because we're going back to B1. Then we'll do a closing parenthesis. If you're paying attention, that's going to close out our find function. Now we need to do a second closing parenthesis. That closes out our left function. So what we're saying is find the leftmost characters in B1 by finding the space and then taking everything to the left of that. And there's my name. And once again, we will just quickly fill that down for the rest of our names. Extracting the last name is going to be a little bit more difficult because unfortunately the find command only works from left to right. So we have to be a little bit more creative, and we're going to use a different function as well. This time we're going to use the right function along with something called length and something called substitute. What we want to do is start from the right this time because obviously this time we're looking for the last name, which would be to the right. But that's where it gets a little bit trickier. Then we need to find the length. And we need to find the length where, again, we're looking for the space. But we can't do that exactly, so what we're going to do is we're going to substitute an asterisk temporarily for the space, have it find the asterisk, then use that number to go back and find the length that we need. Sound a little bit complicated? It's not too bad, but we'll go ahead and work through it together. We'll start by using a right function. We can see with our tooltip that again we need to tell it what text and then what number of characters. Just like our left function, except this time it's going from the opposite direction. So the text that we want to pull this from is, you guessed it, B1. Our second argument is how many characters do we want? And this is where we have to start nesting things together. First of all, we need to find the length of something. That's how we'll know how many characters. So we type len. You can see from our tooltip that this returns the number of characters in a text string. So it basically says how many characters are there. All we have to do for the length function is tell it which text to measure. Now this is where we have to get trickier though, because we don't want the whole thing. We actually want it to find something. The only argument for the length function is which text do you want to find the length of? And this part is actually easy. We're finding the length of B1. But we don't want the entire length of B1. In other words, we don't want ERIN space O apostrophe DELL. That would be 11. What we want to find is the length of that minus something. So just like regular math, even though we're working with text, we'll do a minus sign. What we need to subtract then is something a little bit different. And this is where we're going to use our find command. Notice that even though we're now layering many functions together, our tooltip always works with the current function. So the tooltip is showing us what we need to find. And we're familiar with this because we used it when we found our first name. What we're going to put in here is fairly simple. We're going to look for an asterisk. But the text that we're going to look in is going to substitute something. So we're going to use our last function, which is substitute. What we're going to do is go to B1. The old text that we're looking for is the space. And the new text we're looking for is that asterisk. That ends our substitute function. So I'll do a closing parenthesis. Notice our tooltip then goes back to the find. If we do another closing parenthesis, that closes the find function, takes us back to the original function we had, which is our right function. We'll do another closing parenthesis, and then you can see that we're finished. What did we do again? Well, we said find from the right in cell B1. And then we said we have to find a certain number of characters. The number of characters we want to return is the length of the entire cell minus where the asterisk is that we temporarily substituted for the space. Let's go ahead and press enter. Ta-da! There you go. I know that these can get to be a little bit confusing, but before we move on, let's go ahead and fill this down. And again, you'd want to kind of go through and make sure that all of them look appropriate. As I scroll down, I can see that they all look pretty good. Working with text functions, pulling things apart, can get much more complicated. For example, in this case, we could have middle initials or titles and things like that. But the concept is always going to be the same. It's a matter of telling Excel how to identify what the parts are that we want and how to do that from a particular direction. If we only have 10 names, probably cut and paste or even retype them faster. But if there are hundreds or thousands of them, these functions are going to save us tons and tons of time and effort. While Excel is not a word processor, it does provide excellent tools to allow us to manipulate text, even better than things like Word. It's often a process, and it helps to talk to yourself. Go ahead and say it out loud. Okay, I have these names. What do I want to do? I want to split them into first name, last name. How do I know where a first name and last name is? And that's the critical part. Well, I know by finding the space. By saying that out loud, you tell yourself how to use these functions and what you're actually looking for. With a little bit of practice, it gets easier and provides very powerful results. What we've been able to do in a very short time and with very little manual effort is to take a previously unusable list, put the names into proper case, and separate them into first name and last name fields that we can now put into different worksheets or databases that we have for our sales and marketing team to be able